Well, good day, everybody. My name is Jason Stella, as you know, and I am the Lifetime Training Podcast host, and I have the best guest today. His name is Dr. Jason Wersland, and he is the founder and inventor of the Theragun. And I can't tell you how excited I am. And, welcome, Jason.
Thanks. I'm stoked to be able to talk to these people. I mean, honestly, when we first started working with these guys, it was like, how can I get an audience?
That's fantastic.
This is really so cool. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Well, I'd love to kick it off and just have you have an amazing story on how you came to kind of develop this thing. And obviously your background as a chiropractor as well. So if you wouldn't mind just spending a couple minutes telling the guests, your story and kind of how you came to found and invent the Theragun.
Love to. I grew up in Utah, with a large family and had a farm, and we had big kids. I mean, a big family, had a lot of brothers, and it's really interesting. The only reason I bring this up is I learned when I was really young how to be resourceful. You figured out how to play, and my parents would kick us out of the house at the farm and say, I don't want to see you till dinner time, and that sort of freedom to do what I wanted to, then I realized later on in life, especially with Theragun, it really fed that. So in 2007, I was a chiropractor in Los Angeles. October 2007, I was on a motorcycle heading to get some things at my old school. On the freeway in LA, car cuts me off, and I hit the side of this car going about 55 miles an hour. It broke my helmet, massive concussion. I ended up having a 9mm disc bulge in my neck, which was the biggest problem. Initially, Jason, it didn't happen. I got up, I was shocked that I was okay. I was kind of bleeding in certain areas. They took my bike away, but I walked away,
Oh man.
Physically. But I remember thinking, like, how did that happen? And I walked away from that. I'd never really been in injury. I'd never had an injury. We talked a minute ago about playing soccer and stuff, and I played a lot of sports, but I never had one of those injuries that ended a season or ended something. And so I never had to deal with that. I always felt like I was indestructible. And I suddenly get in this accident and I'd walk away. I'm like, oh my God, I really am Superman. But I realized within a couple of weeks, this thing in my neck was really, really bad.
Wow. Got
an MRI, realized it was a really big disc bulge. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to tough it through. I'll make it, I won't get surgery, and I won't take meds. And I didn't realize how bad nerve pain is. And I think it was a blessing that I experienced that early on in my career, because it gave me the empathy and sympathy for patients. Yeah. And it also stirred this whole Theragun thing on. So now it's December 2007. I'm at my house and I can't move, literally. And I'm thinking, how can this pain stop? I just want the pain to go away. One of my brothers is a chiropractor as well in Utah. I called him and I said, dude, you've been in this accident. He was in a water ski accident about 2 years before my injury. Mm-hmm. And I said, brother, what happened? What were you doing? Like, I saw you out on your porch pulling on your neck and using this thing that vibrated. What is that? He told me what it was. And my business partner in my clinic here in LA had one. Went to the office, grabbed it, started using it, and it vibrated. Jason, it had an adjustable speed on the bottom. It was about the size of a Coke can, and I'd just put it underneath my armpit like this, and it would shake my body. Now, vibration travels to the brain, touching our skin, which is our biggest organ of our body, at 55 miles an hour. Sorry, at 268 miles an hour. I got it mixed up. Pain travels to the brain at 55 miles an hour. So if I can stimulate this nervous system and irritate it in a way that, not hurting it, but stimulating in a way that the message gets to the brain faster, then I override this pain. And that's what was happening.
Wow. That's
so
fantastic.
I would put it on my body, the vibration would shake, my brain would pay attention to the vibration and sort of down-regulate the pain. But the vibration wasn't strong enough, and my body accommodated to that. Okay. So you have a wedding ring on. Your brain isn't telling you all day you have a wedding ring on. You put it on, or when you had it on last time you took it off, you weren't thinking about your wedding ring, necklace, clothes, socks, the same thing. That's called accommodation. And my nervous system started to accommodate to this vibration. So it became less and less effective. So me having the patience of Job, not really. I got super irritated and pissed off that this wasn't working anymore. And I was in a ton of pain.
Yeah.
So at the same time, Jason, I'm also going to my clinic, getting treated by my chiropractor, but I'm experiencing the same thing that any patient does. I leave the chiropractor with all this hope, and I go home, and within hours, the inflammation sets in, and then the pain starts to set in, and then you start having these conversations about, am I ever going to get better again? I didn't want to talk to my kids. I mean, I didn't want to eat. Yeah. And you start getting into this state of mind that is not conducive to a healthy mind. So I thought, you know what? I can't accept this. Like, I'm a chiropractor. I know what I need, and I can't accept this idea of just waiting till my next treatment. Mm-hmm. So all of these components created this idea. I was sitting in my house. I like to say that necessity is the mother of invention. Mm-hmm. I'm not an inventor. I think I'm a resourceful person. I have a problem-solving mind. But I was like, I don't give a F what this thing sounds like, what you call it. I don't care what it needs. I need something to make this pain go away. And I had this idea in my mind of something punching the muscle. I could feel it with my thumb, and it hurt with that constant pressure. The vibration wasn't working. So I made something. 2008, January 2008, I made the very first Theragun. Wow. I started using it on myself, Jason, just for pain. And then as the pain started to go away, and I'm working with my clinician, my business partner, the pain starts to go away. Now I need range of motion. And now I'm starting to use this thing to loosen my joints. And now I'm getting a larger range of motion. Then I get through that. And now I've got to strengthen and do my own rehab. So I do my own rehab. The whole goal for this was to get my feeling back in this hand, and to get back to treating patients, because that's my only source of income. Yeah. Not unlike anyone else that's injured. So I use this thing. It gets me better. By July of 2008, I'm better. I put it in a box. I put it away. It served its purpose. Here's the real kicker of the story. Several months later, a patient comes into my clinic, similar age, similar injury. It was basically retelling my story, and I knew this guy wasn't going to get better in a traditional sense. I knew that if I used the modalities I had, he would have the same problem that I had. One step forward, one step back. One step forward, one step back. And I thought, I can't do this to this guy. And I thought, man, do I show him this? It's not something I'm proud of. It's a power tool. So I bring it to the office. I have it. I sit down with him and his wife looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, dude, listen. And Jason, I hope this is the part that I really want the listeners to understand. I needed help, and I needed his help, but he was helpless. He was powerless, just like I was. And I took this thing, and it gave me power. It gave me the ability to feel helpful to myself. So I said, this tool is to help you stay out of pain when you're not with me. And you don't have to use it on the areas you have pain. Yeah. You can put it somewhere else, because the brain likes that stimulus. So I gave him power. I gave him the ability to believe that this is going to be okay. It's the same thing I experienced. So he comes back, we get him better, and the immense amount of obligation that I felt when he told me it worked, I was like, oh shit, now I got to figure this out. Because it worked for me and it worked for him. Yeah. So from 2008 to 2016, I made 5 different versions. I created this massage gun space when I got so much ridicule. I got chased out of places. I mean, I can't tell you the number of stories about, but every time I put it on someone, it worked. And every time they felt amazing. Yeah. And so I had this drive to just figure it out. So we started the company, my business partner and I started the company in 2016. We started selling our G1, which is, a lot of people know is a noisy product, but it worked, and people didn't care. 2017, we launched our G2 Pro, which was unfortunately a little noisier. Then the G3 Pro we launched late 2018, which is much quieter. We worked with sound engineers from MIT to create an insulated motor. Then now we launched our Gen 4 products, and they have a brushless, amazing quiet force technology, power-driven motor. And we can talk about that in a minute, but that's sort of what happened. And I think one of the things I want people to understand that makes us different is I didn't design this to sell it until I realized what it was doing for the body. And then my main goal was, I want something that I can use in a clinic and that my patients can take home and that it's equally beneficial.
Yeah.
So now you see what Theragun is, where we want to provide natural wellness solutions that are scientifically validated, that can literally change your life. And that's kind of where we ended up.
I love it. And there's so much there, God, that parallels, even though, it was an accident, but the mental space, people are going through that right now. It's a different stress, but it's still a stress. And,
Yeah.
And that's where I think, with stress being abundant, nowadays more so, I think, than normal, muscular dysfunction also following in its footsteps, because there's more people sitting doing Zoom calls like you and I are right now all day long,
Right.
so there's that portion that will create dysfunction, and then pain. And there's, I think, a lot of people that don't understand the role the muscular system plays in pain. And, that's really where a lot of it all of it, you can argue, comes from is those connections. So, with that, and then obviously there's self-care that is starting to boom because of all of these things. But, what have you seen? And we'll get into the products, and I'll show you a couple of the new stuff out there so that they can see and hear what's going on there too.
Yeah.
But, what have been the most common benefits now that it's been out and about? What have been the biggest benefits that you've seen, or the most common ones from the general population using it?
One of the things that's most exciting to me, I really appreciate you asking that question. The thing that's most exciting to me is the most common benefit I'm seeing is what you talked about a minute ago, is people connecting with their own bodies, connecting with self.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot going on in the world, and your logical brain, our left side of the brain, is trying to make sense of all of this. Mm-hmm. And your parasympathetic nervous system runs at a different RPM now because of all this stimulus that's coming in at us from our social, and to be able to have something that physically accesses the right side of our brain and the thalamus of our brain that gives us that sort of sense of well-being is really, really important. So what I'm finding, and we're just going to release this in the next couple of days, is this actually helps your body rest. It helps your body sleep. And you and I know how important sleep and rest is, but your rest has to be quality. And if you're taking, you're running on adrenaline and caffeine and whatever sort of stimulants all day long, and then you lay down and expect your brain just to turn off because it's nighttime.
No.
You sometimes need something physical to do that, whether it's breathing exercises, before sleep meditation, or warm milk and cookies from your grandma, whatever that is, puts you in that state. That's really one of the things that I'm seeing. So there's super, really amazing benefits. Number one, I see a lot of people talk about how amazing it feels on their feet.
Yes.
And that's something that sort of was a byproduct.
Yep.
And then the second thing, to answer your question specifically, is the connection that people have with their body and the part of their body, their parasympathetic nervous system, that can allow them to rest. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting you talk about this, because this is like a massager. Yep. And the fact that I'm talking about turning on your parasympathetic nervous system, this is sort of counterintuitive, because you have this thing that's punching your body. But it runs at a frequency, Jason, that actually speaks to the brain. It's a gamma wave frequency. Love it. And I used to wonder why people felt so amazing. Like every time I put it on them, oh my God, what is that? Uh-huh. And that's what it is. I realized, I finally, through some research we've done, it's that trigger of the thalamus.
That's fantastic. And you brought up the well-being piece, and I can't tell you how much I love that. I mean, obviously we've got the Live, Train, Eat. That's part of our philosophy now. And the Live is all about that well-being and self-care. And how can I'm 40 some years old, and I'm like, when I could have a 4-pack dissolve, and as long as I'm pain free, I'm cool with that. I don't need to be shredded, and everybody's got their own goals, and whatever. I'm not saying that's to not have those goals, but
I don't care who they are. Some people, unfortunately, would rather have a 6-pack and walk around in pain.
Yeah. Yes. So so that's the big thing. And I love that it's used as in your finding that it can be used in many different ways, and having originally unintended consequences positively in people's lives. within it, I've read in several different books, a very popular, I just looked it up on Amazon. I can't believe it's $800 right now. I know I didn't spend that, but it was the Myofascial Pain and Dysfunction books by Travell and Simmons. And, the quote I want to bring up, and I'd love your opinion on it, says, these muscles in general and trigger points receive little attention as a major source of pain and dysfunction in modern medical school teaching and texts. And I'm wondering, from your opinion, is that true? And do you agree? And why is that?
I think that the fascia in our system is underutilized, understudied. I think a lot of times people, let me back up. I think it's really important for people to understand how they feel. And I could, as a practitioner, I could bring you in and I could do every modality based off of your structural feedback I get from diagnostic studies. I could do all this sort of nerdy stuff. And as you're standing at my door to leave the office, if you don't feel better, you don't give a shit what I did, right? So if I can't make you feel different, then I'm not doing really anything. And I think one of the most overlooked things is fascia. And when you have, I'll call them knots or bound up areas of fascia, it's going to alter the way you move. I'll share with you a really good experience. I had a pain in my, just above my QL, my quadratus lumborum in my low back, and it shot me out of bed at 3 a.m. about 6 weeks ago. And I thought someone was like stabbing me, and I couldn't, for the life of me, it was intense. I have a guy that treats me. I went to his office. We started talking, and he found this trigger point in my glute med TFL, right above my belt line on my right side. That the minute he started poking that, it was like, oh, that's the spot. I would have never looked there. Yeah. I would have never paid attention to that. So one of the things that Theragun does is it causes mechanotransduction, which is mechanical heat to the tissue that lies underneath the skin. And when you access that and you start to move, it's not just a physical thing, Jason. You're not just pushing out that knot. Mm-hmm. You have to reset that space and then reset the nervous system, understand, hey, you're not dealing with that dysfunction anymore. So one of the things that Theragun's been able to do is really help address the fascial trains or yep. planes, whatever people want to call them. Yep. I call them kinetic chains. Yeah. So if I'm working with your kinetic chain, there's things, if there's something wrong in that kinetic chain, it doesn't matter what I do, you're not going to move functionally properly. So I think I'll answer your question. That was a long answer.
But one of the things I also want to point out, because some of the listeners might not know the anatomy, but he had mentioned, and I want to bring this up because it's a huge point, in that there's a small muscle in the quadratus lumborum that's kind of in your lower back region, connects to your spine and your ribs and your hip, or your iliac, and that's where the pain was. But where he used the gun was more on the side of the hip, in kind of more side front of the hip. Yeah. And that's what created that. So it's how we're connected and how this gun can actually impact other areas. Because usually where the pain is and where the problem is sometimes aren't always the same.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. I tell people, and this really gets into the connection. My parents live in Norway. My dad's got shoulder problems. And I've had him treat the shoulder directly. We get on Zoom and I'm walking him through it. One of my cousins is a physio up there, so we're kind of talking through some of these things. And I had to explain to him, you need to use the Theragun and find where this is originating, because it's obviously not your shoulder. We've done everything we could to your shoulder. So I think the point to make with people is trigger points are areas in muscle and fascia that radiate somewhere else. And it's sort of a ghost pattern sometimes, unless you know the neurology. Yeah. But I think people suffer from those a lot, and it gets in their head that it's much worse than it really is, when it's really not that big of a deal. You just need to get someone that understands the fascial trains and the kinetic chain to be able to work through that.
Yeah. And it brings up a second quote that I pulled from that same book. And it said, myofascial trigger points are extremely common and become a painful part of nearly everyone's life at one point or another. It says, then the latent or what we would call the non-painful areas or the latent trigger points cause movement dysfunction, stiffness, and restricted range of motion without pain, and are more common than actually the active ones that do actually cause the pain. And, this is again, that preventative side where unfortunately a lot of people in our world, they don't do anything until the pain's so bad that they have to actually now deal with it.
Yeah.
But, can you talk a little bit about, it's kind of almost exactly what you were just saying, is that find the spot, because, just where you hit it and where it hurts might not be actually where the problem is.
Yeah, I think so. I'll share an example with you. I think that a story might be the easiest way to explain this. I was at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis working with a bunch of guys, and it's sort of a crazy week when you're doing this because they test all day, and then their only time to really train is at night. Mm-hmm. So from 11 p.m. to about 2 a.m., you're in a massive convention hall where you got guys doing sprints up and down the hallways, and I'm kind of bouncing from player to player or athlete to athlete. And I got to this DB who's a real tall safety, and he was doing these sort of out of the block sprints to get his 40 time. Mm-hmm. And I was watching him, and he wasn't moving right. And I was asking him, and he couldn't figure out what was going on. So I went over and I started working on his body. And I had 2 Theraguns. So I started his mid back because it was in his sort of hip flexor, low back, his glutes, his butt, and his hips and stuff. I couldn't figure out what it was by watching him. So I went over and I started working with a Theragun, and I had one down the back on left and right. And as I got down, the right side just started jumping all over the place.
Yeah, I've seen that happen to me a couple times too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I backed off, and then I came back in, and I said, hey, breathe. I was trying to see if he could change it. It's not changing. So I'm like, okay, here's the problem. But it was on the back side where he was having problems in his hip flexor. So I was like, it's the psoas. Something's happening with the psoas. So I start working on the psoas. We do a hip flexor stretch. It doesn't do it. Well, I chased this thing all the way down to his glute medius. It was almost where I was having my problem. It starts, it wasn't moving smoothly. Mm-hmm. Laid him down, did some stretches, sort of reset that fascia with the Theragun. He got up, and it was like, bam. To your point, there was no pain there. He couldn't point to it and say, doc, it's right here. Mm-hmm. He was like, I don't know. I don't have my spring out of the gates. So I think it's what the thing to me, the common denominator between these two things you're talking about is you can have a trigger point that's killing you. You can have a trigger point that's killing you and radiating somewhere. You can have a trigger point that's not doing anything pain-wise. It's not registering on your feeling meter, but it's causing dysfunction in a lot of other areas. Those things sometimes happen in between visits. Yeah. Between your massage therapist and your physio. And I think it's really important. One of the most beneficial things that I've found with Theragun, whether it was with my clients that I have or my patients, is them finding these on their own and learning what it is. And it suddenly creates this connection with their body, this confidence in their ability to treat themselves, and self-care. Yeah. I think one of the things that's so important nowadays with all this technology and all these things is it's giving us so much data, but what are we really doing with that? And how do we connect with ourselves? You mentioned using it at your son's soccer game, finding areas on your son, like, hey, do this and do that. Even though these kids, when they're 15 and 12 and 13, are like rubber bands. Yeah. But I really appreciate you bringing that up, because it's trigger points, whether they're latent, which means you don't recognize them, or they're real strong, can cause some major dysfunctions in our life.
Yeah. One thing I have to ask too is, because that's happened to me, a couple times where I've hit an area and I know it's not bone, and it just jumps back off, hard. And can you explain to the, to the listeners, what is that? What's causing that?
Yeah. I've done a lot of this, so hopefully this makes sense. Your body, our bodies have a frequency. And I know that might seem sort of strange, but we all run at a certain frequency. Frequency is timed by the second or the minute. I believe, and we're doing some research to validate this, that when you're taking Theragun and you're running it around a tissue, if the tissue is healthy, it's a smooth sort of rhythm, and it doesn't hurt. It just kind of feels good. But when you get into an area where the frequency and the nervous system isn't smooth, you start hitting this sort of interruption, and it sort of rattles, like it's just not smooth. And sometimes there's pains associated with it, and sometimes there's not. And what I tell people is stay on that area for 3 to 5 seconds, slowly moving it around, and you'll hear the noise from the Theragun and the sort of inconsistent rattle between your body and the Theragun. You'll hear it go away, and you'll feel it go away.
Got it. And is that also, obviously in the box that you get, depending upon the one you get, I don't know if they all come with the same amount of attachments. There's varying different attachments. Yeah. And can you explain to the listeners, why would I use maybe, what I've got them here, one of the smaller, softer ones versus, like this one here, that's a kind of a little bit more, kind of firm. Yeah. Like, why would you use that one versus, something that might look like that, which might be a little bit more intense?
Such a great example, Jason. I'm honestly, if they're watching, those are such good examples. I had a patient just recently who had, I think, probably popped her shoulder out a little bit. She jumped in a water slide and put her hand back, and it sort of jacked her shoulder a little. So I start messing around with her shoulder, and I realized that I can't use one of our attachments, meaning it was too much for her. So I'm like, okay, well, let me scale it back. So I get one of our softer attachments, we call the dampener, and I lowered the Theragun to the lower speed and started using it on her. Too much. So then I put my hand on her shoulder and put it on my hand, and I was like, okay, you know what? We need the super soft. So that super soft spongy one was, her body could tolerate that.
Beautiful.
So now you think of someone that may have a pulled hamstring, really bad shin splints, maybe some neck pain, some trap pain, where that wedge that you showed, that wedge was intended to be like the side of my thumb, where I'm pushing tissue kind of like this with my thumb, or my elbow, where I'm sliding my elbow along tissue, sort of pushing the tissue like that. That was what the wedge was made for. So I also use the wedge around the shoulder blades of quarterbacks to sort of scoop in there. But that was too much, too impactful for this female patient I had. So I dialed the Theragun down, put the super soft on, and now I could increase blood flow and work the heat. And I eventually got to where I could step up to a different attachment. So each attachment was really made for specific uses and specific body parts.
Got it. And, I think I have to do this now just because, I think that I want to make sure that people, if they don't listen to the entire podcast, they hear this, because this is the brand new, is it
G4, Gen 4.
Yeah, Gen 4 Pro, which is just phenomenal. And I'm going to turn this sucker on and put it, and you can hear that sucker and what it sounds like. Now, the biggest issue with Theragun early on, people would complain, is the sound. Now, I've got the competitor over here, and that's, oh, I hit it, so that won't count. But that's the same thing. I would argue that this might even be a little bit softer now. But yeah, that's the guy. And I have to also say that the sturdiness of this thing is second to none, versus, as you can see, I had to do my own tape job because I tried getting myself in the back here and it popped right off. So I had to put my own clear duct tape on there. So I had to do that to make sure we can put that argument to bed before we get any further. So,
I think I want to tell you an interesting story. In 2016, late 16, early 17, we were faced with a challenge. We had worked on the G2 Pro in such a way that we felt like we'd addressed the sound that we were having with G1. And I went to our manufacturer, and they set up a bunch of G2 Pros out in front of me. And they looked amazing. I couldn't believe the first product we'd made from the ground up. I grab a hold of the first one, sounds perfect, it hums, and I put it on my hip flexor and I break it. And I'm like, I take another one, start messing around, hip flexor again, a little force, and I break it, meaning the gears just went, you could hear them grinding to a halt. And I'm like, what's happening? And they said, well, we didn't think anyone would push that hard. I'm like, everyone's going to push that hard.
Yeah.
So we had a challenge, an engineering challenge, and I had to be faced with the idea of moving away from our science and respecting noise, or staying with our science, respecting our science, and recognizing that noise is just something I have to deal with. And Jason, that was a really hard decision.
I could imagine.
Because I had to really challenge myself thinking, do I believe in this science? And do I believe when this science gets on a person, sound will become secondary? And I look back on that moment. I was on the rooftop of this building with my business partner. I was in tears. I thought, this is it. Like, we can't do this. I knew that competitors were coming out behind us. From that day is when we realized we have to make our own motor. And we did make our own motor. And so that one you have in your hand is our own motor. We made it ourselves. Wow. It took 2.5 years. It's proprietary technology. I'm super excited and proud of what that was.
Congratulations, man.
I think anyone else would have made the easier decision. Be like, no, let's just go with something quieter. But I had so many good experiences in a clinic, on a racetrack, on a football field, with people that just had such amazing results. And there was something about our science, that frequency and amplitude and torque we have, it's now I'm starting to understand what that is. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Noise is an issue, and it's a big deal, but we were never going to sacrifice science for noise. And now with our motor and the quiet force technology, there's literally no boundaries. We can use these in the spot.
And it just, I love that, because it shows the integrity of what you're trying to do and in the product. And at the end of the day, we all are in business, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that it actually works. That's great. Well, I'll dive into some of the other products a little bit later. I want to just continue to talk a couple things just around some, where have you seen locations? Because a lot of people are like, do I really need this? What's going on? But, obviously through the body and through typical daily movements, trigger points sometimes come in common places. What have you seen as, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of the top common places that people, can use this or do use this?
I think there's 3 specific areas, and you could probably argue it might be 4. Out of respect to your idea of pain radiating.
Yeah, exactly what we talked about before. Yep.
Yeah. So if you think about it, low back, shoulders and rotator cuff muscles. So low back, shoulder, and I say forearms and your neck. And the only reason I say forearms is most of what we do nowadays, Jason, look at us, both our arms are bent.
Yeah.
Our arms aren't extended. We're sitting here at a table with our arms bent all day. We have our phone in our hand all day. We're up here like this all day.
I think this is going to be the new look. Like people are going to walk around and you're just going to see people like this. And it's just because of how they hold their phone all day.
We're going back to the Darwin days where they're like leaning over with their hunchback.
Yeah.
So I think again, low back, shoulders, neck, and forearms. So if you think about the low back, the reason low back pain is so predominant is we're sitting on our butts so much. Mm-hmm. Hamstrings are short and tight, hip flexors are short and tight, and the center of that tug of war is our low back. And so when people think, oh my God, I have low back pain, this really goes back to what you said, Jason, which is that's not where the pain's generating from, or it's manifesting there, but it's not generating from there. So to be able to use, we have a low back pain protocol we have in our app. It's something we teach in our courses, but your low back pain comes from your hamstrings, your IT band, your glutes, your butt muscles, your glute med and glute max, your hip flexors, your piriformis, all of these areas manifest to that low back pain. And we just don't move enough. And I think the same thing with our shoulders. We're not doing overhead stuff anymore like we did when we were little. You get someone like any of us that reach to grab a door, or we're driving, we got to grab something behind the car seat behind us, or you're pulling kids out of a car seat, you recognize, whoa, what was that? That doesn't feel good. And a lot of people have front side shoulder pain. And so they think it's right here, doc. I can feel it right there. Well, guess what? That's your anterior delt. That has nothing to do with your shoulder. Mm-hmm. It's underneath. And to be able to understand it's your rotator cuff.
Yeah.
It's these muscles here that allow your arm to move and rotate. So that's what I get excited about is we all have these problems, but how do we really address them? And this is teachable. This is something you can really learn on your own. So you're not having to go see a clinician all the time. And not that they're bad. I'm not saying that.
Yeah. No. Well, it's just like, the training world's the same way, just the regular person. There's only 2 or 3 hours if you're lucky and can afford 2 to 3 hours of work. You're going to have to put other work in to really get, the benefits of really being healthy and, happy and, staying pain free. So, within it too is it kind of brings me to, with self-care being something that's growing, and you mentioning, your neck, and, if you saw my face when you said in here, because I know what the heck that feels like, and there's a lot of stuff going on in there, nerve wise too. So, what would you say the top 3 don'ts, or, what do you got to be careful on when using this thing? Because again, it could be a tool or it could be a weapon, so.
Yeah, I do say to people a lot, because they say, is this dangerous? I'm like, well, we all have knives in our house. We're not cutting ourselves every day, exactly. Right? Yep. We learn how to be careful. So there's a few areas, and I'll go through these. It's not intended for your head. But post-surgery, if you're using it right on the scar, that we recommend not doing that. But I've actually been in surgery rooms, Jason, and worked on patients just after they had the procedure, but not on the actual point, whether it was a scope or cut. I worked around the area and their recovery was much better. So, and I also want to be careful about using it. We just talked about my low back, where the QL is. Some people have kidney issues. And if you have a sharp pain back there when you're using this, that usually is indicative of something with your kidneys.
Okay.
So I tell people to go to their doctor. And then the last thing is pregnancy. We want to make sure that people that are pregnant stay away from the abdomen and the low back. There's not enough research yet for us to feel comfortable and confident saying you can use it, but it's amazing on your feet if you're pregnant and your shoulders, because you now carrying this huge thing in front of you. So I hope that gives a quick list of.
No, it is. And I guess I also think, around the neck area, what precautions should, people take as well when you start to, because a lot of people get, that levator up at the top of the base of the skull and you really want to hit it, but it's, you just got to watch what you're doing and get comfortable, with the handle and holding it in different.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So what I usually do is I'll take this thing. I don't have a super soft with me right now, but I'll actually take this thing. The neck is really important. Everyone has neck pain. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important to understand, again, the pain may be manifesting there, but it's probably coming from your rotators, your middle back, your trapezius, your big muscles in your neck. And so I tell people you're okay to treat up to about C4, which is about your Adam's apple. Yeah. But if you're going to treat, I say never treat in the front ever with anything. That area, as you know, carotids and stuff like that. But then I'll take this and I'll rest this on my shoulder and I'll slowly put it on that suboccipital levator area you talked about with this super soft. And then I can just sort of lean into that nice and soft. And then you see I'm just having this rest. I'm controlling it with my head. So if I can pull away if I need to, I'm not using it like this.
Yeah.
So
that's an awesome tip. I've never seen that in how, you're able to use that, rest it. Yeah.
You can feel what's happening. If it starts to rattle your skull, then you're too close to the actual bony parts of your skull. Yeah. But if you get the super soft, and I wish I had one in front of me, I could actually show you how I do it. Yeah. But that, I think if you're comfortable and confident about doing that, use the super soft. And you're going to show them the mini.
Yeah, this is the mini, folks. This thing is fantastic too. I mean, it's just great. I was using it, like I said, at my son's soccer game. I was sitting, we had to watch from behind the fence. So I backed my car in and, have a truck and was just sitting there and I was just hitting it. And there was 30 people walking by me going, oh my God, can you do that on me? What's going on there?
You make a lot of friends if you have it there.
Yeah. So that's great. Well, one of the things you brought up, which I think is a big differentiator too, and what I love about the newer gun here is the education that's involved.
Yeah.
You know, there's stuff that you get obviously that is with the gun itself, and then there's other things if you want to level up and get higher. But the integration I thought was so cool, where this newer one has integration Bluetooth to your app, and it literally shows you exactly where, and it puts on the actual intensity that it should be on of the different intensity levels, and it shows you exactly what you should do for how long you should do it. And that is just awesome and genius. But what else can you tell everybody about the education that's involved, because obviously using this thing right is super important.
Yeah, we actually realized that we needed an educational module to this whole thing, whether it's you, your wife, a personal trainer, or a professional athlete, or an athletic trainer for a professional team. That was another thing we recognized, that it was our obligation as a leader in this sport and this space. So we actually created what's called Therabody University. It's got a landing page, a website that's on our website. And we have, just like a university, we have 100, 200, and 300 level classes. So our 100 level class is just like, your prerequisites in college. You have Math 101 and Science 101. Well, we have Foundations 101. And it basically explains, what is percussive therapy? How do you use it in your life? What expectations can you use going into it? What are the outcomes you can expect? We have history and simple applications. And then as you move up, we actually have a licensed massage therapy course that is certified with continuing education credits for massage therapists.
Awesome.
We've taught over almost 1,000 massage therapists during COVID. You can imagine they can't work unless it's a necessity or an essential business associated with essential business, but they discourage massage therapists. So there's a lot of these people that wanted to be upskilled.
Yeah.
In our 200 level course, we also have our performance course, which is for athletic trainers, personal trainers. We've trained hundreds of personal trainers on using this product, using Theragun in their training. Mm-hmm. And it's just an added benefit. Some guys are adding a $25 fee at the end just for a quick 10-minute recovery session.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think it's important to stop right there, is because we've been talking about this tool mainly from a pain management and to get out of pain. But can you also spend a little time talking about the importance of this tool and how it helps improve recovery post-workouts and beyond?
Absolutely. It's, I think if people remember this podcast in 2 or 3 years from now, Theragun and some of these other devices will become the training norm, because you literally can eliminate DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Yeah.
Right? Think about that. I think one of the biggest hindrances for people is they're going to go and work out 3 days a week. They're going to bust their butt on Monday, and they know they're going to be sore till Wednesday. As a personal trainer, what good am I if you can't work out on Wednesday? Mm-hmm. So it's what we have science that actually validates, Jason. I'm glad you brought this up. We have science that proves this works better as a pre-warm-up tool than anything else, including dynamic stretching.
Wow.
It actually facilitates recovery during your training. So if you're using this between sets, you're actually facilitating flushing out that lactic acid, bringing in new blood, resetting your neurology, and you never, normally when you're doing a set of 5 sets of 20 or something like that, you get to the 3rd or 4th set and you're just fatigued. You're really busting it out. Your form changes. Your recruitment is weird. Mm-hmm. But if you can add the Theragun in between sets. So before we say 30 seconds on the origin, insertion, and muscle belly, 10 seconds each. Wow. That's what you do before you warm up. We have science, and this is part of our education.
Yeah.
During your warm up, you're going to use it for 15 seconds just on the muscle belly. And that's just while you're kind of catching your breath. You're between sets, whether this is legs, a Peloton ride, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Use this between your sets and your recovery comes better. Now we're talking about prevention. This isn't post-workout, you're going to now treat your body. Yeah. You're preventing DOMS along the way. Now, after, sit down. The sooner you can do this after a workout, the less chance you have of having any muscle pain. So if I just got done playing golf, I'm going to make sure and work my body out before I get in my car and drive wherever I'm going. If I just finished a workout in the morning, I'm going to take an extra 5 minutes and treat those areas for about 2 minutes on each muscle. So to your point, we have an educational course. Our performance course actually helps you learn how to use Theragun to perform better.
Wow. One thing I want to bring up, I heard, there's certain, when you're at a muscle belly or when you're hitting, a lot of the nervous system, it actually will shut down that nervous system. So what can you speak to in regards to, potentially opening up range of motion while you're working out that you might not be stable in? And how do we, is it different attachments, different pressures, what advice do you bring there?
Yeah, it's timing. That really is what we found out. Some people are more comfortable with this attachment and they love this one. Some people like, when I work out, I use the wedge. You showed the wedge. Mm-hmm. It's much more impactful. It gets to the areas. I can be more specific about it. So I think the biggest issue really is timing and time, how long you use it and where you use it. If you're not paying attention to that, you're going to recruit, your body's going to fatigue, and your kinetic chain, back to what we talked about, is going to not be evenly distributed. So I hope I'm answering the question. It's really about the protocols that we found through our research. If you follow those protocols, you're not going to injure yourself, and you're probably going to feel, look, I love it when trainers text me back and be like, dude, my clients love this because they can go 110% every workout.
That's awesome. Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'm so excited, that we're partnering with you guys and that we'll continue on with further education. And, this was an absolute blast, and just wanted to know if there's anything else that you wanted to share with the audience that maybe we haven't talked about before we take off.
No, I think, what's exciting to me is we talked about this a little bit, but the idea of being able to down regulate, the idea to be able to reset our bodies. I think the go, the kids, the job, the groceries, the COVID, all these things that are stressing our bodies, to have something that you can use on your body that is proven to put your body in a restful parasympathetic state is so needed nowadays. And I think that's one of the special things about Theragun and our timing is we're able to provide that with something like this. So I would ask your people that are listening to be open to the idea that this tool can really help you with your pain and managing your pain, whether it's a trigger point, muscle tension, whatever that is. It can help facilitate a much better workout, and it can also help you down-regulate your nervous system to sleep better. We're coming out with a sleep study that we did with a company, and it's going to be considerable. It really has been. For me, it's been one of the funnest things because I work on athletes after a game. I can literally put them to sleep on my table.
They need it.
What's happening? Yeah. We should be able to access this. So I appreciate you asking me. I think one of the coolest things is be open-minded to what this can do. Mm-hmm. I would ask you to take the moment and connect with yourself. And if connection is a better workout, if connection is a better, instead of coffee at 3 o'clock, it is this. If connection is getting a better night's rest, just be open to that, because you'll find that this is really going to, I under promise, over deliver.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And for those out there, members, trainers, obviously we have all of the products. We've got the Mini, we've got the G4 Pro, and then I believe we've got a couple of the other models that come down in price slightly. And they're all available, on the Lifetime Shop, website. And obviously you can get discounts and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure we'll be having some great things as the holidays come along, soon. So I can't tell you, if you don't have one, get one. If you've got an old version, get the new version, because they're better, especially if you don't know how to use it. So, Dr. Jason, I really thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully we can do this again another time and go into some other stuff. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason.
Take care.
Appreciate it.